The city was noisy that afternoon, the kind of noise that fills the air after a long day of rushing people and impatient cars. It had rained a little earlier, leaving the streets shiny and wet. The gray clouds still hung low, and the smell of wet pavement mixed with the faint aroma of coffee from a nearby cafe. Daniel was standing outside that cafe, holding his umbrella in one hand and his phone in the other. He was a man in his early 40s, dressed in a dark suit that fit him perfectly. He worked for a large company, always busy, always serious. People in his office often said he never smiled unless it was for a deal. He didn't care much about small talk, birthdays, or family gatherings. He only cared about work. He was checking his phone when something small tugged at the edge of his coat. At first he thought it was the wind or maybe a stray dog, but then he heard a tiny voice. "Sir?" "Excuse me, sir." Daniel turned. Standing there was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Her brown hair was damp from the rain, and her small hands clutched a teddy bear that looked old and worn. Her shoes were muddy, and her jacket was a little too big for her, as if it had been passed down from someone older. Daniel frowned slightly. "Yes, what is it?" he asked, glancing around to see if someone was with her. The girl looked up at him, eyes wide and nervous. Can you please pretend to be my daddy? Just for one day?" Daniel blinked. He thought he hadn't heard her right. "What did you say?" She swallowed hard, holding the teddy closer. "Please, sir. I just need someone to be my daddy. Just for today." People walked past them, umbrellas bobbing up and down, too busy to notice. The rain had started again, just light drops this time, but the girl didn't seem to care. She stood there, looking up at him with those hopeful eyes. Daniel's first instinct was to walk away. He wasn't the kind of man who got involved in other people's problems. "Where's your mother?" he asked, looking around. "She's at work," the girl said softly. "She works a lot," he sighed. "Then where are you supposed to be right now?" "At school," she said, "but they have a Father's Day event. All the kids have their daddies there." She hesitated, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't have one." Daniel felt something uncomfortable stir in his chest. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't married, had no children, and honestly, he had never thought much about having any. The girl looked down at her shoes. "I tried asking other people, but no one stopped." Daniel looked at her again. She wasn't crying, but her lips trembled like she was trying hard not to. The teddy bear in her arms looked like it had been hugged too much, the fur almost gone in places. He cleared his throat. "You shouldn't talk to strangers, you know." She nodded. "Mommy says that too. But you look kind." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't sure anyone had called him kind in a long time. He looked at his watch. He was already late for a meeting. He had reports waiting, a client call scheduled, and now this child was asking him to be her father, for a day. "It sounded crazy, I'm sorry," he said finally. "I can't do that." She looked up at him again, her eyes suddenly watery. "Please, sir. Just today. The teacher said we can make a drawing with our dads." "I just want to have someone next to me." "Everyone else has their daddy there." Her small voice cracked halfway through the sentence. Something inside Daniel paused. He remembered being a child once, long ago, when his own father had missed his school events. He remembered the empty chair next to him and how he pretended it didn't matter. Maybe that was why he grew up believing it was better not to care. But looking at the little girl now, standing in the drizzle with a teddy bear and hope in her eyes, something in him shifted slightly. He sighed again. "What's your name?" "Lily," she said softly. "Lily," he repeated as if testing the sound of it. "And what's your full name?" "Lily Hart," she said. "My mommy's name is Grace." Daniel looked around one more time. "All right, Lily, where's your school?" Her face lit up immediately. "It's just down the street." "I can show you." Before he could say another word, she grabbed his hand. Her small fingers were cold but firm. Daniel almost pulled back. He wasn't used to being touched, but he didn't. He just let her lead the way. They walked together through the damp street. Cars splashed through puddles and people hurried by, but Daniel barely noticed. The girl was talking, telling him about her school, about how they were going to make paper crowns for their dads, and how she was the only one who didn't have anyone to come. "My mommy said maybe I could just draw her instead," Lily said, "but the teacher said it has to be a daddy." She looked down for a moment. "So, I thought maybe if I found someone nice, it could still count." Daniel nodded slowly, not sure what to say. He was still thinking about how strange the situation was. But he also couldn't bring himself to stop her. When they reached the school gate, colorful balloons were tied to the fence. A sign read, "Happy Father's Day Celebration." The laughter of children floated out from the hall. Daniel stopped at the gate, unsure if he should go in. Lily turned to him. "Please, sir, just come in for a little while. You don't have to say anything. You can just stand there." Daniel looked down at her again. The rain had stopped now and the sun was starting to break through the clouds. He sighed deeply and said, "All right." "Just for a little while." Her smile was so wide it almost made him laugh. She squeezed his hand again and pulled him through the gate. Inside, the hall was decorated with colorful streamers and paper hearts. Fathers sat with their children at long tables, helping them glue paper, cut shapes, and laugh together. Daniel felt out of place immediately. He loosened his tie, trying to look less formal. Lily led him to a small table near the back. "This is our spot," she said proudly. The teacher noticed them and came over. She was smiling warmly. "Oh, Lily, you made it. And this must be your dad." Daniel froze. Lily looked up at him quickly, her eyes begging him not to correct her. He forced a small smile and nodded slightly. "Yes, I'm her dad." The teacher smiled and moved on. Daniel sat down awkwardly while Lily began working on her paper crown. She was humming softly, cutting out stars and hearts. Every now and then she'd look up and smile at him. "Can you help me cut this part?" she asked. Daniel hesitated, then picked up the scissors. His hands were big and clumsy next to her tiny fingers. He hadn't used craft scissors since he was a child himself. They worked together for a while. Lily laughed when he accidentally cut the paper crooked. "It's okay," she said, giggling. "You're learning." Daniel found himself smiling too. It felt strange, but not bad. After they finished, the teacher asked everyone to come forward and say something about their dads. Daniel immediately felt nervous, but Lily didn't seem worried. When it was her turn, she held his hand and walked to the front. "This is my daddy," she said proudly. "He came today just for me." Daniel's throat tightened. He looked around the room. The other parents smiled politely. Lily went on. "He helps me make crowns and he makes me laugh. He's the best daddy ever." Everyone clapped. Daniel felt something stir inside him, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. When they sat back down, Lily leaned closer and whispered, "Thank you." He didn't know how to respond. All he could do was nod. After the event ended, the kids ran outside to play. Lily ran with them, showing off her paper crown. Daniel stood near the gate, waiting. He had planned to leave quietly once it was over. But then Lily came running back, out of breath, holding a small piece of paper. "This is for you," she said, handing it to him. He looked down. It was a crayon drawing of a man and a girl holding hands with a sun in the corner and the words, "Me and Daddy," written on top. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. "It's very nice," he said quietly. She smiled proudly. "Now I have one too," she said. Like all the other kids. For a moment, Daniel just stood there, unsure what to do. Then he reached out and gently patted her head. "You did great today, Lily." She looked up at him and grinned. "You too, Daddy." Before he could reply, one of the teachers called her name. She waved at him and ran off to join the others. Daniel stood there for a long moment, holding the drawing. The rain had stopped completely now. The world felt quieter. He looked down at the picture one more time, then folded it carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket. He didn't know why, but as he walked away from the school, he felt lighter somehow. The meeting he had missed didn't seem so important anymore. That little girl, Lily, had asked him for something simple, something small. But somehow it had stirred something deep in him, something that had been quiet for a very long time. And as he walked down the street, with the sound of children's laughter fading behind him, Daniel realized that maybe, just maybe, pretending for one day had changed something he didn't even know needed changing. The next morning, Daniel woke up earlier than usual. His alarm hadn't even gone off yet, but his eyes opened naturally, as if something inside him refused to rest. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling. The rain from yesterday had passed, leaving a soft light that filtered through the curtains. He turned his head and saw the folded piece of paper on his nightstand. The drawing. The one Lily had given him. The little stick figures of a man and a girl holding hands with a bright yellow sun and the words written in uneven letters. "Me and Daddy." He picked it up and looked at it for a long time. He wasn't sure why, but the sight of it made his chest feel tight again. It had been years since something so small had made him feel this way. He got out of bed, made coffee, and tried to focus on work. His laptop sat open on the kitchen table, but he kept glancing at that piece of paper. His assistant called to remind him of a meeting, but even while she spoke, his mind wandered back to that little girl, her big eyes, her shy smile, the way she had looked so proud holding his hand in front of her classmates. When the call ended, he found himself wondering if she had told her mother about what happened. Did her mother know she'd gone up to a stranger and asked him to pretend to be her dad? Did she get in trouble? He shook his head, trying to brush off the thought, but it stayed. Later that afternoon, he took a walk during his lunch break. He passed by the same cafe where it had all started. For a few minutes, he just stood outside, staring at the spot where Lily had first spoken to him. He didn't know why he was standing there. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe something else. Just as he was about to leave, he noticed someone familiar coming out of a small grocery store across the street. It was Lily, walking beside a woman who must have been her mother. The woman looked tired, her hair tied back neatly but with loose strands framing her face. She wore a simple uniform, the kind that workers in a bakery or shop might wear. She held a brown paper bag with one hand, and Lily's hand with the other. Daniel hesitated for a moment before crossing the street. He didn't want to seem like he was following them, but before he could decide what to do, Lily spotted him. "Daddy!" she called out happily, waving her small hand. People on the street turned to look. Daniel froze for a second, feeling his face warm up. He gave an awkward smile and walked toward them. The woman looked confused at first, then alarmed. "Lily, what did you just say?" "That's Daddy," Lily said proudly, pointing at Daniel. "The one who came to school." The woman's eyes widened. "You what?" She turned to Daniel quickly. "Excuse me, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." Daniel raised his hand slightly. "Yes, I'm sorry. I can explain." The woman looked tense, like she was ready to grab her daughter and run. "Please do," she said sharply. Daniel took a breath and spoke gently. "Yesterday she came up to me outside the cafe. She said her school had a Father's Day event and she didn't have anyone to bring. I didn't know what to do, but she was standing there alone and she asked so politely, so I went with her, just for the event. I didn't mean any harm." The woman's shoulders slowly relaxed, but her expression stayed guarded. She looked down at Lily, who was clutching her teddy bear again, and then back at Daniel.
"She really did that?" He nodded.
"Yes, I didn't want to intrude. I just wanted her to feel included, even if only for a few hours." For a moment, the woman said nothing. Then she sighed softly and shook her head. "She's been struggling with that lately," she said quietly. "Every time the school has a father's event, she comes home crying. I told her it's okay, that I can go instead, but she said it's not the same." Her voice broke slightly at the end. Lily looked up at her mother and said, "Mommy, he was really nice. He helped me make a crown." Daniel smiled a little. "She did most of the work. I just messed up the scissors part." That made the woman laugh quietly, and for the first time her face softened. "I'm Grace," she said finally, extending her hand. "Thank you for what you did. I don't know many people who would have said yes to something like that." "Daniel," he said, shaking her hand gently. "And really it was nothing." "Nothing?" she repeated with a small smile. It meant everything to her. Lily looked up at both of them, smiling brightly. "Can we get ice cream, Mommy?" "Please, I have my allowance." Grace laughed softly. "You only have enough for one scoop." Lily looked between them, then asked, "Can he come too?" Grace hesitated, glancing at Daniel. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Only if it's okay with your mom." She studied him for a second, then nodded. "All right, just for a few minutes." They walked together to a nearby ice cream shop. It was small, with colorful chairs and the smell of vanilla in the air. Lily ordered strawberry, while Grace got coffee flavor. Daniel, after much convincing from Lily, went with chocolate. They sat together at a corner table. Lily was talking nonstop, about school, her teddy bear, and how she wanted to be a nurse when she grew up. Grace listened with patience, occasionally smiling at Daniel as if to apologize for her daughter's endless chatter. Daniel didn't mind. He actually enjoyed it. It had been years since he'd had a simple moment like this. No meetings. No deadlines, no business talk, just normal conversation. At one point, Lily leaned her head on her mother's arm and said, Mommy, can he be my pretend daddy again next year? Grace froze mid-bite. Daniel didn't know what to say. Lily, she said softly, brushing her daughter's hair back. We shouldn't ask people for things like that. But he was nice, Lily said. And everyone thought he was really my daddy. I want that again. Grace smiled sadly. Sweetheart, you already have everything you need. Lily didn't answer. She just nodded quietly and went back to her ice cream. Daniel watched them for a moment. He could see the love between them, gentle, quiet, unspoken. It reminded him of something he had lost a long time ago. When they finished, Grace thanked him again. I'm really sorry for the confusion earlier, she said as they stepped outside. You must have thought I was about to call the police. Daniel chuckled. It crossed my mind. They both laughed, and the tension between them eased completely. Grace looked at him curiously. You don't have kids, do you? He shook his head. No, never really thought about it. I've been too busy working. She nodded slowly. Work is important, but so is living. Her words stayed with him longer than he expected. As they were about to leave, Lily hugged him suddenly around the waist. Thank you again, Daddy, she said softly. Daniel looked down, startled but moved. He crouched slightly so he could meet her eyes. You can call me Daniel, all right? She shook her head stubbornly. No, just Daddy, for pretend. Grace smiled faintly and said, Come on, sweetheart. Let's go home. Daniel watched them walk away hand in hand until they disappeared around the corner. That night, back in his apartment, he couldn't stop thinking about them. He tried to focus on his reports, but his mind kept drifting. He pictured Grace's tired smile, Lily's bright eyes, the sound of her laughter. He poured himself a glass of water and stared out the window. The city lights glowed below, and for the first time in years, the silence of his apartment felt heavy. He had always told himself that loneliness was just part of success, that it was better not to get attached, better not to feel too deeply, but that belief didn't feel so solid anymore. He picked up his phone and opened the drawing again, snapping a picture of it before setting it on his desk. Something about that small crayon drawing made him feel grounded, human. Over the next few days, he kept thinking about Grace and Lily. He wondered how they were doing. He even found himself passing by that same grocery store again, hoping to see them. One evening, as he was leaving his office, he saw them again. Grace was outside the same shop, carrying groceries while Lily skipped beside her. She noticed him first. Daniel, she called out. Look, Mommy. He's here again. Grace looked up and smiled. Well, that's a coincidence. Daniel smiled back. Seems like we shop at the same places. Grace laughed softly. We live nearby. That's probably why. Lily tugged at her mother's sleeve. Can we invite him for dinner? Grace's eyes widened slightly. Lily! But Daniel smiled. That's very kind of you. He hesitated, then added, only if it's no trouble. Grace hesitated for a moment, then sighed and smiled. It's fine. We don't have much, but you're welcome. That evening, Daniel found himself sitting in their small but warm apartment. The walls were decorated with drawings and the air smelled like home-cooked food. Grace made simple dishes, rice, vegetables, and chicken stew, but it tasted better than anything Daniel had eaten in weeks. Lily sat across from him, talking about school again, while Grace listened quietly. Daniel felt strangely comfortable there, as if he belonged. After dinner, Grace poured him some tea. Thank you again, she said softly. You didn't have to do any of this. He smiled faintly. Maybe I needed it as much as she did. Grace looked surprised. You? Daniel nodded slowly. I've been so caught up in work that I forgot what it feels like to just sit down with people, to listen, to laugh. Grace smiled warmly. You're welcome here anytime. As he left that night, Lily ran to the door and handed him another drawing. This one of 3 people holding hands. Her mother, and him. He smiled. That's us. She nodded proudly. Family. For a moment, Daniel didn't know how to speak. He simply smiled and said, Thank you, Lily. I'll keep this one safe too. As he walked home, he felt a strange warmth spreading through him, the kind that doesn't fade easily. He didn't know what the next days would bring, but he knew one thing for sure. That little girl and her gentle mother had already begun to change something inside him that he didn't even know was broken. The following week went by quickly for Daniel. His office was busier than usual, and meetings filled up most of his days. But even in the middle of work, his thoughts kept drifting back to that small apartment, to the sound of Lily's laughter and the way Grace smiled quietly when she talked. He found himself smiling at random times, something his coworkers noticed. One of them even joked, "You look like a man who just got promoted or fell in love." Daniel only laughed it off. "Neither," he said. But deep down, he knew something inside him had changed. He used to go home every night to an empty apartment and scroll through emails until he fell asleep. Now that silence felt heavy. He missed the noise of Lily's little voice, her endless stories, and the warmth of that simple dinner they shared. One Friday evening, as he was leaving work, he saw the same grocery shop again, the one near Grace's apartment. He stopped in front of it, debating with himself for a few seconds, and then stepped inside. Grace was there, sorting vegetables. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "Daniel," she said, "you're becoming a regular around here." He chuckled softly. "Maybe I just like the company." She laughed lightly. "I see." Lily appeared from behind a shelf holding a packet of cookies. When she spotted him, she ran up, grinning wide. "Daniel, you came!" Her joy was so genuine it made him forget how tired he was. "Hey, Lily," he said, crouching slightly. "Those cookies look good. They're my favorite," she said proudly. "Mom said I could have them if I finished all my homework this week." Grace gave a small nod. "And she did." "That's impressive," Daniel said. "You must be really smart." Lily's eyes sparkled. "Mom helps me with reading. But math is boring," Daniel laughed. "It was boring for me too when I was your age." Grace smiled softly. "Still boring, I bet," he grinned. "Maybe a little." After they finished shopping, Daniel helped them carry the bags home. Grace tried to refuse, but he insisted. "It's no trouble," he said. "I could use the walk." When they reached the apartment, Lily immediately began unpacking the groceries, humming to herself. Daniel noticed how neat everything was. Even though the apartment was small, it felt cozy and full of life. There were small drawings taped to the fridge and a few handmade decorations near the window. Grace made tea and they sat at the small dining table again. The soft evening light made the room feel even warmer. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by," Daniel said. Grace shook her head. "Not at all. You're always welcome." Lily looked up suddenly. "Can we play a game after tea?" "What kind of game?" Daniel asked. "Guess the animal," she said, bouncing excitedly. "I act it out and you guess what it is." Grace chuckled. "You've been practicing that all week." Lily grinned proudly. "Because it's fun." So after they finished their tea, Lily started the game. She pretended to be different animals, hopping like a rabbit, crawling like a turtle, roaring like a lion. Daniel guessed each one, sometimes right, sometimes wrong on purpose just to make her laugh. Grace watched them from the couch, smiling quietly. For a moment, Daniel glanced at her and their eyes met. There was something gentle in that silence, something unspoken but warm. When the game was over, Lily climbed onto the couch between them and said, "This was the best day ever." Daniel laughed. "Better than the Father's Day event?" She tilted her head. Maybe they're both the best." Grace smiled. "It's bedtime soon, sweetheart." 5 more minutes, Lily pleaded, leaning on her mother's shoulder. Grace sighed playfully. 5 minutes. Daniel stayed a little longer, helping clean up a few dishes. Grace worked beside him, their movements quiet but comfortable. "You're good with her," Grace said softly. Daniel looked at her, surprised. "I've never been around kids much." "You wouldn't know it," she said with a smile. "She adores you," he smiled faintly. "She's easy to adore." For a moment, they both fell silent. There was something different about the air between them, not romantic, just peaceful. Like two people who had both been alone for too long, finding comfort in each other's company. When it was finally time for him to leave, Lily was half asleep on the couch, clutching her teddy bear. Grace walked him to the door. "Thank you again," she said. "You didn't have to help us, but—" "I'm glad you did," he nodded. "I'm glad too." Outside, the night air was cool. He walked home feeling strangely light, as if the world had softened around him. Over the next few weeks, their visits became more regular. Sometimes Daniel stopped by after work bringing small things for Lily, a book, a puzzle, a bag of cookies. Other times, Grace called to invite him for dinner. It wasn't about gifts or gestures. It was about connection. The three of them had found something that felt almost like family. One Saturday, Grace invited him to join them at the park. Lily was excited. She ran ahead, her laughter echoing through the open space. Daniel and Grace followed, talking casually about life, work, and small things. "Do you ever take a break from your job?" Grace asked. He smiled faintly. "Not really. Work has always been my excuse for everything." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Excuse for what?" He hesitated. "For not living, maybe." She nodded quietly. "I used to do that too," she said. "After my husband passed, I worked all the time. I thought if I stayed busy, I wouldn't feel so much." Daniel looked at her with quiet understanding. "I get that." They walked in silence for a moment. The park was full of families. Fathers tossing balls to their kids, mothers laughing, children running barefoot through the grass. Lily ran up and tugged on Daniel's sleeve. "Come push me on the swing," he smiled. "You got it." He pushed her gently, watching her hair fly in the wind as she laughed. Grace stood nearby, watching with a soft smile. Something about that moment stayed with him. The sunlight, the laughter, the simple joy. It felt like he was seeing life from a place he'd forgotten existed. Later, when they sat on a bench eating ice cream, Grace said quietly, "You know, Lily hasn't smiled this much in a long time." Daniel looked at her. "She's a wonderful kid. She just needed someone to listen." Grace nodded. She used to wait by the window every evening hoping her dad would come home. "Even after I told her he wasn't coming back." Her voice trembled slightly. Daniel didn't know what to say. He wanted to comfort her, but words felt small. So instead he said softly, "You've done a good job raising her. She's kind. That means she's had love." Grace smiled, her eyes glistening a little. "Thank you." When evening came, they all walked home together. Lily held both their hands, one on each side, swinging them as she walked. People passing by probably thought they were a family, and for a moment Daniel almost believed it too. That night, after they said goodbye, Daniel stood at his window again, watching the city lights. He felt something deep, not loneliness this time, but longing. He realized he cared about them, more than he had planned to. The next day he decided to surprise them. He bought a small set of watercolor paints and drawing paper for Lily. When he arrived at their apartment, Lily opened the door and gasped in excitement. "For me?" she asked, her eyes wide. "For you," he said, smiling. She hugged him tightly. "You're the best." Grace came over, smiling. "You didn't have to, Daniel." "I wanted to," he said simply. Lily spent the afternoon painting while Daniel and Grace talked. She painted all three of them together again, this time sitting on a park bench smiling. When she showed it to him, she said proudly, "I'm going to hang it next to the other one." Daniel smiled. "I'd be honored." After that day, it became their little tradition. Every weekend he'd visit and they'd do something together, cook, play games, or go to the park. Lily called those their family days. One evening, while Grace was cleaning up the kitchen, Daniel helped her dry the dishes. She glanced at him and said softly, "You've changed her world, you know." He smiled. "She's changed mine too." Grace looked at him, her expression gentle. "I think you were meant to meet her that day." "Maybe we all were," he nodded. "Maybe so." For the first time in years, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. But deep down, he also felt a quiet fear. He didn't know what the future would hold. He didn't know how long this happiness could last. All he knew was that he didn't want to lose it. When he left that night, Lily waved from the window, her little hand pressed against the glass. Grace stood beside her, smiling softly. As Daniel walked away, he realized that what had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into something much bigger, something real. And though it had all begun with a small voice asking him to pretend for one day, Daniel now knew this was no longer pretend. It was the start of something that felt like home. Days turned into weeks, and weeks quietly slipped into months. Life for Daniel began to feel different now. The cold silence of his apartment no longer felt as heavy as before. His evenings had a rhythm, sometimes dinner with Grace and Lily, sometimes a walk in the park, sometimes just a phone call to ask how their day went. It was strange for him at first. For years, his life had been about deadlines, contracts, and numbers. He had never imagined he would one day find peace in a small apartment filled with laughter, crayons, and the smell of home-cooked food. Lily had grown even more attached to him. She called him almost every evening to tell him about school, about her drawings, her new songs, or how her teacher praised her handwriting. Sometimes she just called to say, "Good night, Daddy Daniel." The first time she said that, Daniel had almost dropped his phone. The word daddy still felt strange to him, but he couldn't deny the warmth it carried. Grace had noticed the bond, too. At first she worried it might confuse her daughter, but over time, she saw how much joy it brought to Lily's life. The little girl who once sat alone during school events now laughed freely. She was more confident, more alive. One evening, Daniel stopped by their apartment after work. It was raining again, soft drops tapping on the window. Grace was cooking while Lily sat at the table painting another picture. "Guess what I'm drawing today?" she asked, grinning. Daniel took off his coat and crouched beside her. "Let's see, that looks like a house." She shook her head. "It's our house. You, me, and Mommy, we're in the garden." He smiled softly. "It looks beautiful." Grace turned from the stove, smiling. "She's been talking about that garden all week. She says she wants flowers and a swing." Daniel chuckled. "You're dreaming big, Lily." "It's not just a dream," Lily said seriously. "We'll have it someday. You'll see." Her certainty made Daniel smile. She spoke with such faith, such simple trust, that it made him want to believe it too. Dinner was simple, soup and bread, but it felt warm and special as always. Grace asked him about work, and he found himself telling her more than he had ever told anyone before. She listened quietly, occasionally giving small pieces of advice that surprised him with their wisdom. After dinner, when Lily went to her room to get ready for bed, Grace poured tea for both of them. They sat at the table, the rain pattering softly outside. "She really adores you," Grace said after a pause. Daniel nodded slowly. "I adore her too," Grace smiled faintly. "You've made her believe in something again. For a long time she felt like she was missing a piece of her world. You filled that space." He looked down, unsure what to say. "I didn't do much. You did more than you know," Grace said gently. "Sometimes a little kindness is all someone needs to start healing." Her words stayed with him long after he went home. The next morning, he woke up early again, something that had become a habit. He looked at the drawings Lily had given him, still pinned to his wall. Each one told a story, small, colorful, and full of love. That day at work, his assistant noticed something different in him. "You seem happier these days," she said. He smiled. "Maybe I am. Someone special?" she teased. He hesitated, then said softly, "Two someones, actually." That weekend, he invited Grace and Lily to visit the city zoo. Lily had never been there before, and her excitement was endless. She clung to his hand as they walked from one enclosure to another, pointing at every animal. "Look, Daniel, a giraffe!" "It's so tall." He laughed. "It's taller than me, that's for sure." Grace smiled, watching them from a few steps behind. "You two look like you've been doing this forever," she said. Daniel turned to her. "Feels like it sometimes." They spent the entire day there. Lily rode on Daniel's shoulders to get a better view of the elephants, and they all shared cotton candy under the big oak tree near the exit. It was simple, yet perfect, one of those days that stay in your memory forever. When they got back home that evening, Grace thanked him softly. "You really made her day," he smiled. "Mine too." For a moment they stood there at the doorway, the air quiet between them. Grace's eyes met his, and there was something unspoken there, something warm but fragile. She broke the silence first. "You're good for her, Daniel, but I hope you're careful too." He frowned slightly. "Careful?" "She's young," Grace said softly. "She doesn't understand the world the way we do. I don't want her to get hurt if things change." He nodded slowly, understanding her meaning. "I won't let that happen." Grace gave a small smile. "I know you won't." After that night, Daniel started spending even more time with them. He found himself planning his days around their little family moments. He even skipped business trips he once would have considered essential. His friends noticed the change. "You've gone soft," one of them joked. Daniel only smiled. Maybe softness isn't such a bad thing. One evening, while Grace was at work, Daniel went to pick up Lily from school. The teacher greeted him with a smile. "You must be Lily's father." Daniel hesitated for a moment, then smiled politely. "Yes, today I am." Lily ran into his arms, happy as ever. "You came," she said, hugging him tightly. "Of course," he said. How could I miss it? On the way home, they stopped for ice cream. Lily told him about her new school project and how she wanted to make a storybook. It'll be about a little girl who found a daddy when she least expected it, she said. Daniel felt his heart tighten. That sounds like a wonderful story. When they got back home, Grace was already there. She smiled when she saw them. You two look like you've had fun. We did, Lily said proudly. Daniel said he'll help me make my storybook, Grace laughed. He's spoiling you, Lily giggled. He likes to. That night after Lily went to bed, Grace and Daniel sat by the window. The city lights twinkled outside and a calm silence filled the room. You've become part of our life now, Grace said quietly. Daniel looked at her. And you've become part of mine, she smiled faintly. I'm glad you were the one she found that day. He looked thoughtful. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped. Grace's eyes softened. Maybe you both would still be looking for something. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the faint hum of the city. Later that week, something unexpected happened. Grace got a call from her workplace. Her shift hours were being reduced. It meant less pay, and she already struggled to cover rent and school expenses. Daniel found out when he visited that evening. He noticed the quiet worry in her eyes. Is everything all right? He asked. She hesitated, then sighed. They're cutting hours. It's not terrible, but it's going to make things harder. He thought for a moment, then said, Maybe I can help. But she shook her head quickly. No, you've already done enough. I can manage. He respected her pride, but still wished he could do more. That night, as he walked home, he thought about how hard she worked, how strong she was. She never complained, never asked for help. And yet she carried so much weight alone. The next day, he quietly arranged something through his company. A small scholarship program for children from single-parent families. He made sure Lily's school was included. Grace didn't need to know it came from him. He just wanted to make things a little easier for them. A few weeks later, Grace called him, sounding excited. You won't believe this, she said. The school just told me Lily's been given a scholarship for her next year. I don't even know how. Daniel smiled softly. That's wonderful news, she laughed. It's a blessing. I don't know who made it happen, but I'm so grateful. He said nothing, just listened to the happiness in her voice. That evening, when he visited, Lily ran to him with a big grin. Mommy says I'm going to the same school next year. Isn't that great? He smiled and lifted her up. That's amazing, Lily, you deserve it. Grace stood in the doorway, watching them with quiet affection. You know, she said softly, she talks about you all the time. You've become her hero. Daniel looked down, his eyes warm. She's mine too. For a while, everything felt perfect. Their little world was full of laughter, small surprises, and love that didn't need to be spoken. But one evening, while Daniel was at dinner with them, he received a call from his office. A big opportunity had come up, a transfer to another city for a major project. It would mean months away from home. He didn't answer right away. He looked at Grace and Lily sitting across the table, both smiling at something Lily had just said. The thought of leaving them made his heart ache. When Grace noticed his expression, she asked softly, Everything okay? He forced a smile. Just work. Later that night, when he went home, he sat in silence for a long time. The decision should have been easy. It was the kind of offer people dream of. But now, for the first time in his life, work didn't feel like the most important thing. He realized something simple and powerful. Success meant nothing if there was no one to share it with. Over the next few days, he thought deeply about it. Then one evening he went to see Grace and Lily again. As soon as Lily saw him, she ran up and hugged him tightly. Daniel, guess what? We're having a play at school next month. You have to come. He smiled, his heart heavy and full at the same time. Of course I will. Grace noticed the look in his eyes. What's wrong? She asked quietly when Lily went to her room. He took a deep breath. They offered me a transfer. It's a good opportunity, but it means leaving for a while. Grace looked at him, her face unreadable for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. I see. I haven't decided yet, he said. Because I don't want to go. She smiled gently. You should do what's right for you, Daniel. You've worked hard for it. He shook his head. Maybe what's right for me isn't about work anymore. Grace looked at him, her eyes soft. Whatever you choose, we'll be here. That night, as he walked home, he looked up at the stars and realized how much his life had changed. The man who once lived for success now lived for something far more precious, the quiet, laughter of a little girl and the kindness of a woman who had unknowingly taught him the meaning of home. He didn't know what he would decide yet, but one thing was clear in his heart. No matter what happened next, he could never go back to who he was before that rainy afternoon, the day a little girl had looked up at him and asked, "Sir, could you pretend to be my daddy?" Just for one day. The morning sun came through the window softly, painting the room with a gentle golden light. Daniel sat at his table, his phone in his hand, staring at the message from his company once more. The offer letter lay open beside his coffee. It was everything he had worked for, a promotion, a bigger office, a new city. But as he looked at it, he felt none of the joy he used to feel when success came knocking. Instead, all he could think about was the sound of Lily's laughter, the way she ran to hug him after school, and the warmth of Grace's quiet smile when she handed him tea after dinner. Those moments had become the center of his world, the reason he woke up with purpose. He thought back to that rainy afternoon months ago when everything had changed. A little girl holding a worn-out teddy bear had asked a simple question, one that had touched something deep inside him. He had thought he was just helping her for one day, but now that one day had stretched into something far greater, a connection that felt like family. That evening, Daniel went to see them. Grace was folding laundry when he arrived, and Lily was sitting on the floor coloring. "Daniel," she cried out, jumping up to hug him. "You came. Look, I drew something for you." She ran to get her drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Above them, in her neat little handwriting, she had written, "Me, Mommy, and Daddy Daniel." He smiled, his heart aching in the sweetest way. "That's beautiful, Lily." Grace smiled too, though there was something different in her eyes, a softness mixed with worry. She had guessed he would come to talk about something important. After dinner, when Lily went to bed, Daniel and Grace sat together on the small couch. The air between them was quiet but filled with unspoken things. "I got the offer," he said finally. "They want me to move to another city. It's a good position, one I used to dream of." Grace looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup. "And now?" he sighed. "Now I'm not sure I want it anymore." She glanced up. "You've worked so hard for this, Daniel. Don't let us stop you." He shook his head slowly. "You didn't stop me. You made me see what I was missing. All those years I thought success meant being at the top, having more, earning more. But now I see that none of that matters if you come home to silence." Grace's eyes softened. "You've changed a lot." He smiled faintly. "You both changed me." For a moment they sat quietly, the sound of the ticking clock filling the space. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "But whatever I choose, I want to make sure I don't lose what matters most." Grace nodded. "Sometimes the best things in life aren't planned." He looked at her and smiled. "Like meeting you and Lily." That night when he went home, he couldn't sleep. He walked around his apartment, looking at the small pieces of their life scattered around. Lily's drawings on the wall, the coffee mug Grace had left there once, the tiny paper heart that said, "Thank you, Daniel." He realized that his home had slowly turned into a place filled with their presence even when they weren't there. And for the first time in his life, he knew what it felt like to belong somewhere. To someone. The next morning, Daniel made his decision. He went to the office and asked for a meeting with his boss. Everyone was surprised when he said he wouldn't be taking the transfer. His boss frowned. "You're sure about this?" "It's a major step up," Daniel smiled calmly. "I'm sure. There are more important things in life than promotions." When he walked out of that office, he felt lighter than he had in years. Later that day, he stopped by Grace's place. Lily was outside, sitting on the porch steps, humming to herself. When she saw him, her face lit up. "Daniel, you're here," she said, running to him. He picked her up and twirled her around. "Of course I'm here. I wanted to tell you something." "What is it?" she asked, her eyes wide. "I'm not going away," he said softly. "I'm staying right here." Her smile grew so bright it almost broke his heart. "Really, you're not leaving us?" He shook his head. "Not ever, if I can help it." Lily threw her arms around his neck and whispered, "I knew you wouldn't." Grace came out, drying her hands on a towel. She looked at them both and smiled quietly. "So you decided?" "Yes," he said, setting Lily down gently. "I decided I'd rather build a life here than chase something that doesn't make me happy." She looked at him for a long moment before saying, "I'm glad." From that day on, things began to change in small but beautiful ways. Daniel started joining them for more family moments, breakfast on weekends, park walks helping Lily with her homework. Sometimes he and Grace would talk late into the night after Lily had gone to bed, sharing stories about their past, their dreams, and their fears. They were still figuring things out. Nothing was rushed, nothing was forced. It was slow, gentle, real. One afternoon, Grace invited Daniel to a small community fair. Lily was thrilled, holding his hand as they walked through the stalls. They played games, ate cotton candy, and even danced to the music that filled the park. At one point, Lily ran ahead to get her face painted, leaving Daniel and Grace standing together under the shade of a big tree. "She's so happy," Grace said softly, watching her daughter. "She deserves to be," Daniel replied. "You both do." Grace turned to him, smiling gently. "You've brought a lot of happiness into her life, Daniel." "Into mine, too." He met her eyes. "You've given me more than I ever thought I'd have." For a long moment, they just stood there, not needing to say anything else. As months passed, their bond grew deeper. Daniel became a constant in their lives. School meetings, birthday parties, quiet dinners at home. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was about being there, showing up, caring and sharing small everyday moments that built something real. One evening, Lily had a school play. She was nervous but excited. When she spotted Daniel in the audience, her whole face lit up. Throughout the performance, she kept glancing at him, making sure he was watching. After the play ended, she ran to him. "Did you see me? I remembered all my lines." He laughed and hugged her tight. "You were amazing." "I'm so proud of you," Grace joined them, smiling warmly. "Thank you for coming, Daniel." "Wouldn't have missed it for the world," he said. As they walked home that night, Lily held both their hands, swinging her arms happily. "This was the best night ever," she said. Daniel looked down at her and smiled. "You make every night the best." Grace looked at him too, her heart full. She realized then that somewhere along the way, Daniel had stopped being just a visitor in their lives. He had become part of their family, not by title but by love. A few months later, Daniel helped Grace open a small bakery. It had always been her dream, but she never had the means or confidence to do it. With his support, she finally took the step. The bakery soon became a favorite spot in the neighborhood. Grace handled the baking, Lily greeted customers, and Daniel helped with the business side. It became more than a shop. It was a symbol of new beginnings. One morning, as they opened the bakery together, Lily proudly pointed at the sign Daniel had hung above the door. It said, "Lily's Corner, where every sweet tells a story." Grace smiled and looked at him. "You didn't have to name it after her." He smiled back. "I wanted to. She's the reason we're all here." That day, as customers came and went, laughter filled the small shop. Grace looked around, at Lily serving cookies with her bright smile, at Daniel wiping the counter, at the sunlight pouring through the window, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. That evening, after closing, they sat outside the bakery with cups of tea. The sky was painted with the colors of sunset. Lily leaned against Daniel's shoulder, half asleep. "You're the best daddy," she murmured softly. Daniel's eyes grew warm. He looked at Grace, who smiled quietly. "She means it," she whispered. He nodded. "So do I." From that moment, life settled into a rhythm that felt right. There were no big surprises, no dramatic twists, just love that grew stronger in the small moments. Sometimes when it rained, Daniel would remember that first day, how a little girl's voice had stopped him in the middle of his busy life, how one simple act of kindness had changed everything. He realized then that family isn't always something you're born into. Sometimes it's something you build. One small act, one shared smile, one promise at a time. Years later, when Lily grew older, she would still tell the story. She would say, "One day when I was little, I asked a stranger to pretend to be my daddy. And he did. But he never stopped pretending because he became my real one." And Daniel, sitting beside her, would smile quietly, knowing that in answering that little girl's plea, He had found something far greater than success. He had found home.